Another week has passed and ranged players have been doing Mythic Plus keys because that's what they do, and now we're gonna rank them. After a week of playing the keys, considering that now there's no more weekly affix, and it makes it easier to see everybody's DPS and performance. So we're just gonna kick it off really quick with Affliction because it's the first one alphabetically, as always. And we're going to put it all the way into A tier. Now, the way that we're gonna be ranking these is at the moment of recording, which is, you know, the state of the meta, the score that everybody has, the level of the keys, the popularity, kind of like a combination of all of those in the top of the top of the top of players playing these individual specs. And that's where Affliction is. It's a little bit on the lower end of A tier, and we're gonna see how this will progress eventually. It's actually really good. I guess, you know, Warlocks are rejoicing across the board, and usually A tiers is where people go to do their 10s and 11s, probably a little bit more 11s as the week progresses, and definitely as the season progresses. And already being here in the second week is pretty good for Affliction. Now we're of course going to keep having buffs and nerfs across the board when it comes to tuning the meta and the distribution of the specs performance in the season, and we're gonna keep seeing that. And so far the meta for Affliction will be at A tier. And if you are going to rank up in the range DPS tier list, you have to do it in style and with a bang. And hey, look what SteelSeries brought us. It's their new Apex Pro Generation 3 keyboard that just released a couple of days ago. With their elevated OmniPoint 3.0 switches and upgraded actuation and response time technology, the Apex Gen 3 keyboard is now the world's fastest keyboard. And you know you need it to be fast when you need to respond to immediate swirlies in the game or surprise frontals. That's even better with the Apex technology of rapid triggers, where you can actually set the activation range of your keys based on how you press it, 100% customizable. This will improve the response time and make you incredibly efficient when it comes to sending commands through your keys. And if you are like me, you might fat finger accidental keys when pressing them, and Apex Gen 3 comes with the protection mode feature, a SteelSeries exclusive by the way, where you can reduce the sensitivity of surrounding keys, so even if you accidentally brush against unwanted keys, they won't register your press, preventing you using that bloodlust too early in the pool. Not only that, Jesus man, this keyboard comes with the full SteelSeries quality that even went further beyond what you are used to. We have been using the Apex Pro Generation 2, which are outstanding keyboards, but the Gen 3 model just takes the quality of the mechanical feel of the keyboard to a new level. And the sound it makes. Dude, have you ever thought about what a physical feeling sounds like? Well, now you can hear how good your fingers feel when you are mashing buttons for top tier DPS. Take your gaming to the next level because you deserve it. Check the link in the description and use our code Marcelian for 10% off of your Apex Gen 3 keyboard freshly out of the oven, and bake yourself the smoothest, coolest, smartest gaming experience in 2024. Now let's look at the next spec on the list. Probably to nobody's surprise is that Augmentation is currently in the S tier. Now why do I keep the mouse there? I can put it here and just take this away and arrange the desk in an orderly manner. Augmentation being S tier is kind of probably not a surprise. You have the people and seething pain of hatred in the hearts of the rest of the community. I actually kind of like having support classes. I kind of don't want it to be the only way you can do high keys, but apparently most of the top keys that are being done right now are kind of done with Augmentation, and it's probably going to be even more mandatory as people kind of get closer and closer to 20s, if we're even going to be able to do 20s this season. But that's essentially where Augmentation is as of now. And that's what S tier essentially is where people are doing, I think, plus 13s as of recording this video. Probably a lot more people are going to be doing plus 13s by next week. But Augmentation is sitting pretty comfortably at the top for pretty much all of the reasons that we know so far that make Augmentation pretty good. Balanced Druid has been kind of like a surprise, maybe not that big of a surprise for other people. I know we did a prediction. I'm not sure exactly where we landed with Balanced Druid, but I knew for sure that Balanced Druid had a lot of damage because I've played with Balanced Druid, this is the mouse, on beta, and it was destroying. It's actually better than Affliction. It's doing pretty well in A tier, and I think this is kind of what we've been expecting Balanced Druid to do for the last 3, 4, maybe 5 years in terms of Mythic Plus. It's a really good spec in the way that it's designed to deal damage. It has troubles always pushing the highest end of the content because of its kit. It's still pretty squishy for a caster, even though you can go into bear form. And I believe that probably the biggest issue that Balance has from being higher in the tier, although it's like already A tier, is boss damage, since that's, you know, the main weakness of Balanced Druid. Now, going to Arcane Mage, you would be surprised to see Arcane not in the S tier, but it is in A tier. And I think soon, there's a reason so that I have to talk about in a couple of minutes, or not right now, but Arcane is definitely in the A tier. It's not in the S tier. It is probably still S tier in raids because it has one of the king single target, and that's probably the main reason you would want Arcane Mage in dungeons over other mage specs. There are other mage specs you would want over Arcane Mage? Weird. We'll get to that in a second. But the single target priority damage of Arcane is really strong. It's probably one of the best in the game. And of course, it's a mage. You definitely want the mage utility kit that comes with the remove curse. Oh my god, that is so good in the dungeons. Plus, you're very tanky. Maybe one of the tankiest DPSers in the game. Maybe one of the most or the best defensives, period. And you bring, you know, time warp. And that's really helpful. Moving to Beast Mastery. Spoiler alert, Beast Mastery will be the worst performing spec of today's tier list. And maybe that can make you slightly happy because we have nothing in the F tier. Because in this tier list we have F tiers, usually we have D tiers. And even with it being the worst in the bunch, it is still C tier. And we are seeing buffs coming to Beast Mastery. It's probably going to be even better once the anniversary patch hits. By the time we get back to revise the M+ meta for range, it's probably going to be at least a month. And that's the situation with Beast Mastery. I don't remember ever being it this low in recent years. It's never, you know, destroyed the meta ever since BFA, but it's been consistently decent. And now being in C tier is probably where it is, just to kind of point out that it needs a lot of buffs. Demonology Warlock is better though, and it is B tier. It's kind of like middle of the pack. It's doing decent keys. I feel like it's edging into 10s, maybe even 11s by the end of the week. It's not an Affliction, of course. Affliction is definitely better, but it is coming along, and we're probably going to... We just had like a big round of buffs, I think about a week or two ago. We're definitely seeing the numbers in, but it's... Nothing else is coming in as opposed to, you know, some upcoming specs. Destruction Warlock is actually very close to performing with Demonology. It's actually, there's like maybe 1 or 2 Destruction Warlocks that are doing pretty high keys, but that's like very few out of the entire Destruction pool. I cannot just take that and rank it any higher, but I think there's still a gap between Destruction period and everything else in A tier. But as it stands, Destruction is not that much good, not that much worse than Demonology. Fire Mage, and soon we can talk. Fire Mage is on the cusp of getting buffs. Like, by the time you're watching this, the buffs have had a couple of days of inactuating Fire's performance. Right now, as we're recording this, Fire is still pretty down in the dumps. The buffs are not going to save Fire or anything, but it's probably going to... I wouldn't be surprised if Fire ends up around B tier-ish. Maybe still below Demonology, but maybe not as low as Beast Mastery. This still has big issues. The benefits of having Fire in a key is that in order for Fire to do the type of AoE damage that it does right now, it sacrifices very little single target, but it doesn't really gain that much AoE either. You're still going to struggle keeping up with some of the top specs. It's not going to be super terrible. It depends on how the builds evolve. As of now, you'll definitely be playing Flame Striking keys, probably Ignite if you keep going higher, depending on how much single target you want. And you may want some single target, but even so, you'd probably better off just swapping to Arcane or to the next on the list, which is Frost Mage. As I've predicted, S tier baby. The performances are very close to Arcane, but I feel Frost is going to be pulling more and more ahead because it's still having pretty strong single target damage, and it has way better AoE. Contrary to popular belief, Arcane doesn't have incredible AoE. It has really good AoE, but it's not incredible. Incredible is the criteria you need to be in S tier. Plus, if you really look at the breakdown of the top 20 people pushing keys as of recording this video, you'll see the predominantly the spec being played as Frost, and then a couple of Arcane sprinkled here and there. It's also kind of hard to judge these two specs because some of the top mages, I think like the rank 1 Frost Mage also is rank 1 Arcane on his or her server and still pretty highly ranked as Arcane, meaning that the #1 Frost Mage in the world doing keys right now is also doing similarly high keys with Arcane, way higher than the majority of the Arcane Mages. And it's kind of like pulling the performance of the spec a little bit higher. And I'm only using this example here because I'm sure there's plenty of other examples, like probably something for Hunters or Evokers, where if the rank 1 person in one spec is off-specking for fun, it's likely going to do similarly high keys, maybe not at the exact key level, but way higher than probably the majority of the other community playing the other off-spec. Marksmanship, surprisingly, this is very surprising. Marksmanship is doing really good. I guess the tuning is just really good and it's just cranking high numbers. And every time I think of marksmanship, I think of what it's going to get in the anniversary patch, which sounds incredible. But as it stands right now, it's probably the best hunter spec. Like, obviously we've had the melee ranking last week and survival was decently high. And if we're looking at a very, very gross representation of marksmanship and survival, marksmanship in at least Archon.gg's rankings is way higher than survival, but Archons.gg ranking is just purely based on M+ score, and that's not really representative. I mean, if you look at it, you might see some similarities to what we have so far, but it's gonna diverge on a lot of other points as well. But hey, that's one other metric you can take a look at. Moving to Devastation, this has also been a very happy surprise, going all the way into A tier. It's actually at the bottom of the A tier. The competition with Augmentation is still really strong, but considering the competition it has is with the best spec in the game, Augmentation, and still keeping it so high, it just goes to show how good Devastation is at this moment, and I can only chalk it to its pure damage output. Devastation obviously it has the Evoker utility, but it's definitely inferior to the Augmentation utility that it brings, but still you can get some of the Evoker love by just getting Devastation, and you can actually enjoy playing a spec because A tier, if you're playing A tier, you're fine. Listen, I'm playing Fire Mage and I wanna cry, but we're moving on to Elemental Shaman, who's actually doing really, really good. Initially, I think in the predictions for Elemental that we've had, I placed Elemental into A tier-ish. I don't know if it was lower, and it's not disappointing. It's actually doing really well, and in the top 20 of the keys cleared at this point. I think we still have the data to show on the screen right now. There are about, I think, 2 elementals. There's way more enhancements, which I mean, great. Enhancement is solid, but we haven't seen elemental in the top 20 in a while, consistently in the meta. I mean, there's always stragglers here and there. People like Petko, Shaman are just gods from a different universe on elemental. I don't know how they do it, but they do it, and they crank the numbers. And lastly, but not leastly, because that is a word here in Romania, you don't know that because you're not Romanian, but Shadow Priest is also in the A tier. This is actually slightly surprising. I think I might be mistaken, but in our predictions, I think Shadow was slightly lower, but it has been getting buffs since it has had some crazy AoE numbers that has been nerfed. I think its Psychic Link was just nerfed about last week, but also got some buffs to single target, which also translates into Psychic Link. So it's neither here nor there, but if anything, it's A tier. But what's lovely to see is that it's not, you know, encroaching on the God Calm / Exodia type meta that we've had with just bring up all of the simp buffs to do this one dude to explode the meters. So it's nice to see it just, you know, with the average folk, and that's kind of where A tier is. We've been debating on whether or not to spread this over the entire tier list and have, you know, like Fire and BM in F, but that would probably misrepresent the performance of the specs, because even though Arcane is a little bit ahead of Devastation, significantly ahead of Devastation, they're still clearing the same level of keys. And that's why they're all in A tier. It's a decently time to play range DPS, and unless you're Fire and BM. But Fire did get buffs this week, which probably didn't manifest yet into its overall performance. We're gonna see that in the following weeks to come. And even if you're playing an A tier spec, it's likely that you might have some issues finding groups, because everybody's playing these A tier specs. But you're not gonna have issues finding groups if you play a tank. Should you play a tank? You should, because we have a video that will tell you why it's good, how it's good, when it's good, and yeah, just play a tank, because I want to play Fire Mage and I need more tanks in my groups.